is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? How's everybody feeling? Having a good summer there, Robbie? Getting to the beach? Yeah. Been a pretty good summer here in the Northeast. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, this afternoon, or whenever you're listening to this. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We're going to start off with a very successful story for a first-time writer, and I think it's something that you will really be interested in if you're serious about writing a book. Did you ever think of taking a class, learning the nuts and bolts of how to write a novel? Michelle Corey says it's the best decision she ever made. Her background is in business, but she always loved to read and always wanted to write a novel. And now, Busted has been published. Take us from the top, Michelle.
Well, about 9 years ago or so, I took a novel writing class, and one of the first assignments was to plot out a novel. Well, I really didn't have a novel in mind. On the way home from class, this plot came to me, and I spent the next week working on it, massaging it. I took it back to class, and my writing professor said, "Whoa, this is really intriguing. You got to work with this, stick with this." And that was the encouragement that I needed, and developed the novel during the class and continued to work with her through weekly mentoring groups.
Nice. So what's the story?
The story is about three people whose lives collide over cocaine. The main character is a 24-year-old starving artist, and she encounters a businessman who buys a couple of her paintings, and she's enthralled with his luxurious lifestyle. And unbeknownst to her, he's a drug kingpin. And she gets pulled into a very vicious, brutal world where she discovers his business partner is a cocaine supplier. Three people in the story: the artist, the drug dealer, and then a DEA agent. And because I did not know this world, anything about this world, I did a lot of research. I worked with a retired DEA agent, a defense attorney, a prosecutor, a judge, a cocaine supplier for Pablo Escobar in the 90s.
How did you find that guy?
Oh my goodness, it was just through networking and asking, and I interviewed women that spent time in jail, specifically in the Orange County jail. And one woman, as it turns out, was transporting cocaine from Mexico to Canada, and she was speeding on the freeway. Well, this is not very smart. Two things: doing something illegal and then speeding on the freeway and getting pulled over by the police, and having several kilos in the trunk of her car. And she went to 4 to 5 different prisons, and the worst one was the Orange County jail. It was the most brutal, vicious, and violent environment that she had been in all of them. And I interviewed another person who spent time in Orange County jail, and their experiences are reflected in the book.
That must have been so interesting, conducting all these interviews.
Well, it was absolutely fascinating, and it was such an education for me. When I met the retired Superior Court judge, he had written a book about legalizing drugs called Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed and What We Can Do About It. And when I started writing, my belief was that all drugs are bad, they should be illegal, they're illegal, and the drug war is good. And in the course of my research, I came to the conclusion that, first of all, prohibition doesn't work, and it just causes black markets, and it's not working, it hasn't worked, and that drugs should be legalized. And talking to him and reading his book really made a strong impression on me. And as a result, I channeled some of his philosophy through a prosecutor in my book. So you get both sides of the drug debate when you read my novel.
For your first time out, this is pretty amazing.
Well, I'm really excited about it. Thank you. It took me a long time. It took me a lot. But first of all, learning how to write a novel, and then secondly, concurrently doing the research. And just so many people helped. A retired lieutenant in narcotics was, at the time he was not retired, but he was very instrumental in giving me real-world experiences. And because of that, the bad guys in my book, what they do and how they do it is all based on what bad guys do and how they did it on real-life situations. So most every major chapter has a genesis of what happened to somebody else that I wove into my character's experiences.
What was the most difficult part of getting this done?
It's taking in pages that you think, oh my gosh, they're just stellar. and then they're ripped to shreds. So the hardest part is getting away from your ego and hearing the constructive criticism and then applying the constructive criticism and making your work stronger and better. And that the hardest part is just not being thin-skinned. It's just, okay, let this go, learn from it, understand it, and recognize the value of what people are offering.
And just to clarify, that criticism came from a mentoring group that you chose to join to become a better writer. Real quickly, Michelle, talk to me about how you're promoting your book. You are promoting your book.
Yes, I had a huge book launching party, 140 people, and I'm doing events at local bookstores and submitted my book to a number of contests, and a number of people have asked me to come to their book club meetings. And I'm also looking for bloggers. I'm searching for bloggers in the suspense arena that can review my book. I did have one fabulous professional review before I got published by Joel Eisenberg, and he's a Hollywood producer and an award-winning author. And he said that my book reminded him of Traffic and Magnolia. And he was very, very complimentary, and his blurb is on the back of my cover. So that was really positive and exciting, and just a positive reinforcement. Blogging is very important. I'm blogging once a week, and when I do blog, I blog about the drug industry, I blog about my book, I blog about my second book, the topics, and whenever I blog, I see a spike in visits to my website, and I've had people complete strangers contact me via my website. And it's just been so rewarding, and to have that contact, and also to help other people. It just feels so good to help other people. So it makes a big difference.
Great, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you for all that great information. How long do we want to live, really? I mean, do you ever think about it? And in what condition? These are the things you might find yourself contemplating when you read John Whiting's book. It's called Complete. So we're going to go up to Eagle River, Alaska, where we find John, a Cape May County, New Jersey transplant, who found the ultimate place to write and be inspired in the middle of nowhere.
We live in the woods. We live with bears and moose, and we're about 20 miles from Anchorage.
Jeez. Lots of inspiration there, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I started writing poetry after a while, and wrote quite a few poems, and then I got into writing, wrote a little novel, and just as a hobby, and that's where that book came from.
That's where Gone Jameson comes from in New Big City, a futuristic underground complex. That's where you came up with all that.
Yeah, right. He seemed to want to live.
He wants to live. He wanted to live past 55. Right.
Society was closing him down.
Oh.
And he decided that he was going to try something different.
So?
What happened to John?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell you that.
Oh, you're not going to tell me. You got to give me more.
That would give away the the story.
Yeah,
I was thinking last night what the book is about.
Okay.
It's about, if you want to put it in one word,
all right.
It's about hope.
Hope?
Hope.
Hope springs eternal.
Well, yeah.
Well,
there was not much hope in the book, but John looked around until he found it.
Well, he gets taken away to Termindale, which right there, that doesn't sound, that sounds like it could be scary, Termindale.
Yeah, that was kind of an ominous place.
That sounds pretty ominous. So he ends up going there, and we don't know what happens. But everybody on the train that he gets on is from the same age group. Now, that's concerning.
Yes. It was pretty easy to figure out what was going on. Obviously, there's a population problem.
Okay.
And so they worked out a system where they can give everybody a shot, and except that you only live for a short time. You don't live as long as you possibly could. And this way they can resolve the health care problem.
So at 55, you check out.
Yeah, apparently. Well, apparently you retire.
You retire,
At
quote unquote.
55.
Yeah, forever. Nobody ever sees you again. Well, I mean, at least you're still in pretty good health at 55, right?
Well, John was in good health. Yeah, some people were not. It didn't seem like they had very good medical care.
What, were you inspired at all by our healthcare crisis?
Well, it must have been a factor. I think the main thing that inspired me was the population problem that we're going through, the expanding population on the earth, and the problems that we're encountering because of it.
Right. But we don't know unless we read the book whether he lives or whether he moves on into retirement.
Yes, it's a quick read. It's a short time, but I've read it about 30 times myself, and I find it very enjoyable.
Okay.
If John inspires anybody, they can tell somebody about it. Otherwise, they can just let him live on in a dusty closet somewhere.
Okay. All right.
I'm also I got another novel about half written, which is a sequel. It's about John's granddaughter.
Oh, it does not end here. There's more.
It seems that way, yeah.
All right. Well, glad to hear it, John. Thanks so much. Lee Cruz is a retired retraining and development specialist. He traveled around the country teaching people communication and problem-solving skills, took note of the program's deficiencies, we'll call them, and fills in the blanks with his book entitled Words. Lee.
Well, the main idea is that what I wanted to do is, when you see two people talking, it gives me the impression that skills are not evident in that sharing of words. There's a sender to sender type of thing, and that only leads to an assumption the individuals interacting, understanding one another. Without the use of the skills, there's a strong possibility that there is no understanding, just the sharing of words.
What would you say is the most important part? Is it reading body language?
That's a part of it as well. The communication process involves facial expressions. I talk about body language and also just the idea of what one needs to do to understand another individual as that individual wants to be understood. I've been around this country 2.5 times training many employees on various topics, communication, problem solving, things of that nature. And it always appeared to me that during the communication segment of the training, the participants exhibited body language to tell me that they were not really in tune, or they were not really doing what needed to be done to communicate effectively with others.
Wouldn't you say listening's a big part of that?
Listening, yes it is.
Really
Responsive
listening. Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. That involves responsive listening. That involves listening with the intent to understand the individual as they want to be understood. And other things are involved there as well to show, being the receiver, that interest is there. In other words, the sender is the star of the show. And the sender is the individual that gets the maximum of attention. And when the sender sees that and perceives that and is comfortable with the receiver, the sender will share more and more information of a personal nature with that person as the receiver, as long as that receiver understands what the sender is saying to them.
Now, you say you provide a lot of examples so we can see how this works and effectively how to be a better communicator.
Exactly, that is correct, and that's very important. It's effective. It's needed on the job as well. Supervisors and managers, they look for employees that can get the job done right the first time.
Right.
And with effective communication skills, the person, the employee, would know how to go about doing that. And these are the people generally gets the special assignments, promotions, getting the job right the first time, understanding what needs to be done as it's supposed to have been understood.
All right, Lee, makes sense to me. Listen, we have to take a very short break, but we are coming right back, so don't you go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Hey, thanks for coming back to the PPBC. Dr. Edmund Salas is our next author. He was fascinated by a book his friends asked him to translate from German into English. His book is entitled Edith Stargard-Wulff, Pathfinder of Great Musicians. Now, Edith was the daughter of two famous musicians named Hermann and Louise, who lived in Germany between 1854 and 1954, and founded a sort of management agency. Dr. Salas.
Yeah, it begins with their father, who was a great musician himself, a great pianist, and he was working in Berlin. And this musician, Anton Rubinstein, was having trouble keeping his finances in order when he was traveling around doing piano concerts. And Anton Rubinstein asked if they knew someone who could help him. And so that's how they got connected. The Hermann Wolf got connected with Anton Rubinstein, a Polish-Russian. And so that was the beginning of the agency. See, the reason why the book is so important, because when he founded this agency, there were others, but he modernized the agency. So the booking and signing of contracts and everything, this was sort of the beginning of what modern music agencies for actors and musicians.
And then he ends up marrying an actress, right?
Yeah. See, that's what makes it so interesting. He met her and they went to the theater. And this was way back in the 1870s. Don't forget, women were not permitted to go out alone. They always had to have an escort. Mm-hmm. One day she wanted to go to the theater. And she went alone, and someone was supposed to pick her up afterwards, but he didn't show up. And she was sitting next to Hermann Wolf, and they both spoke a different dialect. She was from Vienna, she spoke Viennese, and he spoke Berlinerisch. And so that's how they met. It was just pretty by accident.
Yeah, that's great. And so their love affair began, and they built this incredible business that nobody knows about because the book was discontinued.
Right. But then you have to see the agency as a book itself. So when you open it up, a box with a lot of jewels and so lost jewels and things of extreme value inside. And so that's what makes the book so interesting.
Did they represent people that we would know?
Of course. That's what it makes it interesting. Heifetz, the violinist.
Right.
Yeah. And so now here's the story. Like Heifetz, people would think, okay, they managed Heifetz, but then that's the story in itself. There are two stories. One is that this was during the Nazi period. That's when in the early 20s, when the Nazis were started to get started. And so and since he was an American, he didn't know if he should talk to her. Right. He didn't want to talk to her. And then of course we have Heifetz, who was a Jew, so that's also played an important role, but not so important as later on when Hitler got control. And then, of course, after World War I, between France and Germany, they wanted to sort of make peace. And they have Debussy, Ravel, these people who were living, French who were living, they were wondering if the German symphony orchestra would go to Paris and play, would there be an uprising? Would there be a riot? And so Ravel, Debussy had died. Okay, but Ravel and some of the other famous French musicians supported that the German Philharmonic, the Berlin Philharmonic, should come to Paris and play a concert of German music. This was after World War I.
Right.
And so things like that was it's a very exciting period and a very exciting book in its relation to that.
You know, it sounds like you've got a music history book here, Dr. Salas. Very interesting. Thank you. Check out the title of our next author's book. Gary Thomas wrote The Lisa Jones Story, A Thin Line Between Love and Lust. Now, you say you hope people will read this book and avoid the pitfalls of love and lust. Begging the question, do you have some experience with this, Gary?
Yes, I do. As a child, I too was taken advantage of by a family member. Also, as an adult, I got involved in a bad relationship through the eyes of lust, based on how this person looked. And I wound up being abused at 17, basically, by an older woman. And actually, I was also stabbed, and I came close to dying because of that. And so I can really relate to the story of Lisa Jones, who had no control over being basically molested by her first cousin, but they were both children at that time. But he, no doubtly, probably had already been involved with other females, and he had picked up a spirit of lust and perversion, perverted mind, and he enticed her to his house, and she's thinking that he just want her to spend some time with, because they're cousins and they're used to one another, so she doesn't think anything strange about him inviting her over. And then after he invites her over, he entices her into the bedroom, which she thinks that they're going to play checkers, which two teenage kids normally do. But instead, he forced her into having sex. And after having sex with him, she picks up the spirit of lust from him, spirit of perversion. But at first, she is ashamed and feels guilty about what happened. She goes home, and somewhere between that night and the next day, that same spirit that was on him had taken control of her mind and deceived her heart into thinking that she was in love with him. Then after he breaks her heart, by letting her know that, I don't want anything else to do with you. I just use you for sex. And then she goes through life wounded by that and never dealing with the fact that she had been taken advantage of, never really dealing with the heartbreak. And then she meets a young lady who actually helped her. And to a great degree, she did help her, but she never dealt with the spirit of lust, though she dealt with the heartbreak. And then she chooses her first boyfriend through the eyes of lust at her friend's graduation party. And she is warned that this guy has slept with many different young ladies. She's warned that he is not a good guy to get involved with, that he would turn her out, that he drinks, he smokes, he does drugs, whatever. But she looks beyond all of that, and she still gets involved with him because he looks good. And then he turns her out to drugs, alcohol, even more sexual perverted behavior, and then she just goes downhill from there.
Wow, that's powerful stuff.
You see so many victims, female victims of rape, of domestic violence, and so it's my hope that when people read the Lisa Jones story and see how it destroyed her life, it will open their eyes to realize that whatever you was hurt from in the past, if it's going to cause you to choose mates that will abuse you, then maybe you need to deal with that hurt, the root of the problem first, before you go into a relationship with anybody. I'm hoping that they will take from this book that they should slow down and get to know a person before they commit themselves into a relationship with them.
All right, Gary, your heart's certainly in the right place. Thanks. Finally, David Lawrence always enjoyed science fiction and aliens. He put something together a few years back and then got some encouragement, and finally he's published Alien Brother. So this idea came to you when?
Decades ago.
Decades ago, when you were but a child.
Well, like to think that, but it's a gripping tale, I think, about an alien race light years from Earth. They've been monitoring Earth's technological developments, and that's caused a fear that Earth may be close to making space travel to planets such as their own, which are light years away. They've been increasingly concerned over the Earth's increased technology and their lack of maturity, as witnessed by the increasing political and social struggles we have on our planet and our inability to resolve them. So they've developed a way to travel to Earth. Their initial visits ended unsuccessfully. They finally mastered the travel and managed to convince an Earthling to merge with them, or merge with one of them, on the basis that the partnership could heal the Earthling's son, who lies critically injured in a hospital, and that the alien can heal the sun through the powers provided by the alien. Little does this earthling know the significance that merging with this alien will cause. And then through a series of adventures, the earthling and a woman friend began a trip full of dangers and evidence of other aliens already on Earth. And though the alien attempts to provide the direction humanity should take to enjoy earthly existence, situations finally develop which are brought to a head through confrontation with those politically in charge. And there you go.
Well, okay, so do they solve our political and social immaturity?
You're going to have to read the book.
You're going to Comic-Con, or you're going to places like...
Well, so far, I have set up a website, and we're in the process of trying to be proactive and market the book so that people are aware of it and can perhaps enjoy it.
So your son is really the engine, the inspiration behind you, isn't he?
Originally, yeah. And yes, my son is an engine in many ways. It's a story of life and death. It's a love story. It's a story about good and evil, and it contains relevant information for the reader in the areas, I think, of man's violence to man and how this has attracted the concern of an alien planet. This is the first concept of an alien in this manner that I've ever seen, and it answers the technical question as to how warp drive is achieved, and that it does answer questions, I think, which could resolve inner conflicts related to social conundrums witnessed around us daily. And interestingly enough, the alien actually has identified the major causes of cancer and perhaps the solution.
Oh, my goodness. You know what?
There you go.
I tell you, I believe, David, that there are people that believe we are being watched, and that there's people shaking their heads going, geez, what are you guys doing?
Well, you know, we've spent a lot of money and continue reaching out into space, inviting contact. And it's silly to assume that someone isn't going to answer that call. Hopefully it's a good someone.
Well, David, we can only hope. And I hope you've gotten something out of this show. We got to go. Don't forget, you can download the Page Publishing Book Club anytime you want at 710WOR.iHeart.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. See you next time.